So here where I am now, Germany's Olympic Stadium, the home of Hertha Berlin. No fans will be able to come here. Likewise, when the German Cup final was supposed to be held at the end of this month, well, it won't be held at the end of this month. No date yet set for that. But when the Chief Executive Officer of the Bundesliga, Christian Seifert, gave a news conference earlier on, it was very clear he was cautiously optimistic about the decision to go back to playing, saying it was something that had to be done.
Dieser Spielbetrieb ist kein normaler Spielbetrieb.
This competition is not normal. We will continue to monitor the developments of the coronavirus, and everyone in the league must be aware of this. We are playing on probation, and every match day is a chance to prove that we deserve the next one. The first and very important step is not to become infected by the coronavirus, and it is the responsibility of each individual. In the case of the clubs, everyone is responsible, the players, the coaches and the technical staff.
There are many football fans who really want to see some form of elite sport back on their screens if possible, but then there's equally a lot of people in this country who look at how serious the pandemic is and they really wonder whether now is really the right time to be playing elite sport again when people are still dying, hundreds of people dying, many hundreds of people being infected. They wonder whether now is the right time. But what's clear is that the politicians and the sports administrators have all talked to each other and worked out they think this is the right thing to do. They want the Bundesliga back up and running. They want it to complete by the end of June.
Mike Tyson says he wants to return to the ring to raise money for charity. He's been retired for 15 years, but has still got some moves. He put out this 5-second clip earlier this week and it has already been viewed more than 9 million times. The 53-year-old former heavyweight champion has already been offered as much as $3 million for an exhibition fight in Australia. One of his most famous rivals, Evander Holyfield, is coming out of retirement, aged 57. The four-time world heavyweight champ has announced he'll fight in a charity bout. Holyfield and Tyson met twice in the 1990s. Now, with much of the world still under lockdown, there is a rare opportunity for millions of people to experience an event together, the last supermoon of the year. It's the finale of a trio of supermoons which began in March. Appearing bigger and brighter than usual, this one is known as a flower moon. I'm heading out to take a look at that moon. Do stay with us, though. More news in a moment.
They wanted £43 billion worth of weaponry. That was £6 billion in commissions.
There's no hope of ending war because there's always a small cabal of people for whom war is really, really good business.
In essence, we in the United States have privatized the ultimate public function, war.
Shadow World on Al Jazeera.
The latest news as it breaks.
The mine sits within a valley surrounded by bushland, and most of its operations happen about 500 metres beneath the surface.
With detailed coverage.
The Malaysian Navy recently prevented a boat carrying around 200 Rohingya refugees from landing.
From around the world.
Government leaders are accusing their opponents of trying to topple them by tampering with financial stability.
Talk to Al Jazeera. We ask
what your thoughts were when you saw that document for the first time.
We listen.
After the World War, saying, you Europeans go and build the United States of Europe, but we will not be with you.
We meet with global newsmakers and talk about the stories that matter on Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera, wherever you are.
74,000 dead and more than 33 million out of work since March. New figures show the terrible toll of the coronavirus pandemic in the US. I'm Lauren Taylor. This is Al Jazeera, live from London. Also coming up, new statistics suggest black people in the UK are 4 times more likely to die from coronavirus. Why some politicians are being accused of hindering, not helping efforts to stop the spread of COVID-19 in Africa. And a gas leak at a chemical factory in India leaves at least 11 dead and hundreds in hospital. Hello. The devastating financial impact of the coronavirus pandemic continues to unfold as governments across the world struggle to restart their halted economies. A staggering 3.2 million more people have filed for unemployment in the US. That means 33.5 million, or 1 in 5 workers, have lost their jobs since mid-March, when the coronavirus outbreak forced many businesses to close their doors. Here in the UK, the Bank of England warns that the economy could shrink 14% by the end of 2020, the worst slump in more than 300 years. But it says the economy could bounce back by 2021 if the pandemic is brought under control. It's a slightly better picture in China, though. Exports unexpectedly rose by 3.5% in April, partly driven by sales of medical equipment. But analysts warn a 14.2% fall in imports signals more trouble ahead as the global economy sinks into recession. Well, our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett joins us live now. So, Kimberly, quite a staggering figure there for the jobless numbers in the States.
Yeah, and they're expected to continue, and it really is difficult in a single live shot here at the White House to put into context the suffering that is existing in the United States as a result of this. Of course, there have been efforts by Congress to alleviate that suffering in the form of stimulus checks and other remedies, but those are really just a very short lifeline and will not help Americans as they deal with this for weeks, for months, for years. What we know is this is a White House very eager to bring back the economy, pushing very hard as a solution to these job losses that are historic in nature, being compared to the Great Depression. But the reality is, well, these jobs were lost very quickly over a matter of weeks. The recovery is going to be phased. That means it's going to take some time. Now, the U.S. president continues to project optimism in the midst of all of this. But at the same time, the reality is that the projections are gloomy, and they're going to continue to be for some time. Well, we're in the 30 million mark now in terms of the number of jobs lost. It's expected to be much higher than that, even as going as high as the 40 million mark in terms of not only these jobs lost initially, but sort of the second wave as many businesses realize they're not going to be able to reopen.
And Kimberly, aside from the progress on the economy or the lack of it, there's the issue of the virus itself and a case of COVID-19 close to President Trump.
Yeah, what we've learned is that a valet that works with the president, this is a military unit that serves to assist the first family, comes in very close contact. One of those individuals on Wednesday tested positive for coronavirus. This is obviously concerning to the U.S. president as he goes about his day. He was immediately tested, as was the vice president. What we know is that they tested negative, but per the vice president, we now know that they will be tested daily as a result. But this just underscores the problems in reopening the U.S. economy that even the president faces. As we reopen the United States economy, the president's own guidelines call for the most vulnerable, those above 60 years of age, a category in which the U.S. president falls, need to stay at home. But when you work in the White House, home is your office. And so these are the challenges that ordinary Americans face, but the president now realizes he, too, will be dealing with as there is this continued push to reopen the economy. But also we know the infections in the United States continue to rise.
And Kimberly, tell us a bit about a case that's been dropped, an ex-advisor to President Trump. Talk us through the case and the background and the fact that it's been dropped.
Yeah, this is just developing in the last few moments, and this is significant. You remember the Russia investigation by Robert Mueller that enveloped this administration in its early days. Well, one of the people that was caught up and snared in all of that was the very short-serving National Security Advisor Michael Flynn for the U.S. president. Now, he was interviewed by the FBI. He admitted to lying to the FBI during an interview about a conversation he had with a Russian ambassador. Well, there was a second review of this case that was conducted by the FBI. The Department of Justice did this review. It concluded that it will no longer prosecute Michael Flynn. And even though he has pled guilty to those charges, we understand now, according to court filings in the United States here, that this case has been dropped. The U.S. president has been reacting to this in just the last few moments. He said he's very happy. It's not a surprise that he's saying that. He has tweeted extensively about how he feels Michael Flynn was treated, calling it a disgrace at one point. The U.S. president has gone even further, though, now to talk about the FBI. These are law enforcement professionals in the United States, referring to their investigation and the FBI in general as scum. So this is something the U.S. president has certainly very strong feelings about. We are watching carefully to see what more he says. He's been meeting for the last hour with a governor from Texas as he conducts these ongoing meetings and reopening the economy. We expect to have that tape playback very soon.
Kimberly Halkett, thank you very much indeed. Black people could be 4 times as likely to die of coronavirus than white people in the UK. That's according to the country's National Statistics Agency, which says people of Bangladeshi, Pakistani and Indian origin are also at significantly higher risk. The UK has the second highest coronavirus death toll in the world, with more than 30,000 fatalities. Jonah Hull reports from northwest London.
Food donations being prepared for the community at a Pentecostal church in the London borough of Brent. The Reverend Desmond Hall shows us around.
These people are elderly, vulnerable, disabled, some have dementia, some are disorientated.
Brent is one of the areas of London worst affected by COVID-19. New research suggests that's in part because of its high percentage of black, Asian and minority ethnic or BAME residents.
Our community is struggling. Our community, as you may be aware, this side of Brent is within the double digits of deprivation. So the indices of deprivation, we are double-digit deprivation here.
Figures from the Office of National Statistics indicate that people from BAME groups are 4 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than their white ethnic counterparts. The ONS points to social inequality as a major factor, and health officials agree.
BME communities are more likely to live in deprived situations. They're more likely to live in overcrowded accommodation, and many of them are in frontline work, which is exposing them to the virus. So it does show that this virus, rather than being a great leveller, is exacerbating the existing health inequalities that sadly are all too prevalent in our society.
The latest numbers are in line with similar trends among ethnic minority groups elsewhere in the world. At the Reverend Hall's church, we meet Jennifer Green, who does what she can to help those struggling in her community, despite having underlying health conditions herself.
These people that I've been to see are not well. They're sick. So some of them, where it's hard for some of them, as you mentioned, the poor community, some of them can't read. So it's hard for them to pick up a phone, or they have a pride, they don't know who to turn to.
So people are dying, as we say in the biblical terms, people are dying through lack of knowledge. Knowledge is power. And when a community doesn't have knowledge, the community's power is taken away.
In the end, this looks like an issue of poverty and of race, of minority ethnic groups less well connected to public services, more likely to be doing low-paid jobs that they can't afford to give up, and very often directly exposed to the virus as nurses, as bus drivers, often on the front line of the fight against coronavirus. It's yet another way in which this virus is tearing into societies and communities. Jonah Hull, Al Jazeera, London.
Moscow's mayor has extended the city's lockdown until the end of the month. 11 million residents can only leave their homes for essential services and have to apply to use public transport. But some measures have been eased, with construction sites and factories allowed to reopen. The The mayor says he believes the real number of cases in the Russian capital is around 300,000, 3 times higher than the official total. France will start easing its lockdown from Monday, but Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has warned that some areas will continue to observe restrictions for some time. Parisians will have to show forms to use rush hour public transport and avoid parks, but they'll be able to go shopping. France introduced a strict national lockdown in March. More than 25,000 people have died across the country. As the world's economies suffer from the global pandemic, a universal appeal is being made to fund the response. The United Nations is asking for billions of dollars from richer nations to help millions living in the planet's poorest countries. Our diplomatic editor, James Bayes, reports.
An appeal for the most vulnerable countries on Earth. Taking part in a virtual event, the UN's top humanitarian officials have identified 63 countries that need help both to fight the virus and to withstand the effects of the economic downturn.
And so what we're facing now is a double pandemic of truly famines that could impact us in biblical proportions. There's no question mega famines are on our brink, literally right now. Before COVID hit the scene, I mean, we already had 135 million people, as I say, marching on the brink of starvation.
The UN Emergency Relief Coordinator, who also spoke at the event, told me why the richer countries of the world need to act.
Tell us the benefits of acting early.
It's always cheaper and better to act early, particularly with this kind of problem. What we're going to see if there's growing instability and growing migratory pressures and more space created for terrorist and other extremist groups is what's currently a 1-year problem potentially being turned into a 10-year problem. And that's not in anybody's interests. The problem we're dealing with has the potential to circle back all around the world. No one will be safe until everybody's safe. So even in the midst of dealing with this huge domestic challenge in all the rich countries, the smartest strategy is to spend 1% of your effort thinking about the wider world as well.
The problem for this appeal is even the richest countries on Earth are currently facing major economic problems. The first version of this appeal was some $2 billion, and the UN only managed to raise half that sum. Now they're asking for $6.7 billion. James Bayes, Al Jazeera, at the United Nations.
Still ahead this half hour.
I'm Lucia Newman in Santiago, Chile, spending the day with rubbish collectors, one of the most essential jobs and now one of the most dangerous.
And anger in Israel as Benjamin Netanyahu prepares to lead a new government, despite his indictment on corruption charges.
Hello, there's some nice, warm, sunny weather across central and western areas of Europe. It's not been quite so fine across the east. We've had plenty of rain, and we've also had some colder air across the east as well. And in fact, some of that rain up into the mountains has turned to snow. Look at this. In the mountains in southern Poland, enough snow to actually make a small snowman. Very different scene, though, across into southern Germany. Clear, sunny skies. And as I say, the temperatures have been on the high side. Now, that's about to change across the west and the north. Not just yet, but by the end of the weekend. But for now, through Friday, quite a bit of cloud around, but we've got temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Paris and Zurich both at 24. There's some rain showers pushing into western areas of France. Heavier spells of rain into northern areas of Spain. And in fact, the temperatures here not as hot as they have been. But you can see elsewhere we've got mostly clear conditions. Still some showers to work their way through eastern areas of Russia. Now, as we go through Saturday, more in the way of rain across northern sections of the UK, across into areas of Norway as well. And then that rain becoming a little bit heavier and more widespread across areas of France. But when it comes to temperatures, certainly by Sunday into London, up into Oslo, temperatures are going to dip by about 9 or 10 degrees. Meanwhile, across northern Africa, sunny skies throughout the Med means more sunshine across northern Africa, warming up again in Tripoli on Saturday with a high of 36.
As the world fights the corona pandemic,
we're learning more about this every day. It's a new pathogen.
Join our global community.
It's up to us how we come together to fight this.
Answering your questions.
Can I just ask you something absolutely directly that's coming on YouTube? As you were saying, I'm concerned about the front line.
Oh, that's a great question.
Keeping you up to date.
And we've seen countries beat it back and beat it back successfully.
The Stream on Al Jazeera.
Reminder of the top stories here on Al Jazeera. More than 33 million Americans have lost their jobs since the coronavirus lockdowns began in the US. That's 1 in 5 of the workforce. Black people in Britain are 4 times more likely to die from coronavirus than white people. The country's statistics agency says people of almost all ethnic minorities are more likely to be killed by the virus. And the UN says the world's richest nations need to give billions of dollars to help protect people in the poorest countries from coronavirus. The head of the World Food Programme has warned the pandemic could lead to a rise in conflict. More than 2,000 people are now known to have died from COVID-19 in Africa, which has more than 50,000 confirmed cases. With dangerous shortages of ventilators, tests and intensive care beds, health experts fear the continent's outbreak could get much worse. And it's not being helped by the spread of misinformation, including by some African leaders. Catherine Soy reports from Kenya's capital, Nairobi.
Victor Ngethe's job as a journalist with a fact-checking agency is to verify information on the internet and examine the truth to what government and political leaders are saying. He especially needs to be more diligent during the coronavirus pandemic. Ngethe has just analyzed a social media video of the governor of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, Mike Sonko, who recently included bottles of a brand of cognac in food relief packs, and gave this explanation.
That is Hennessy, which has some percentage of alcoholic content, and that should act as a throat sanitizer. It kills the virus. In case the virus is held somewhere in the throat, it kills.
As the disease continues to spread across the continent, so does misinformation about it.
A lot of false information and a lot of misinformation and disinformation play on your emotions. And when people are emotional, they can't be critical.
It's only this product in the world that kills the virus, including SARS.
In Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni recently endorsed the production of a sanitizing spray that a medical investor said could cure the disease. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina also launched the distribution of a herbal drink he said kills the virus. In Kenya, some people are using home remedies they swear will protect them from getting sick. The World Health Organization has said there is no proven cure or vaccine.
These are confusing times for everybody. Many people are now relying more on online content for their coronavirus updates. Some of those we talk to say they are overwhelmed by all the information on social media. Others say they are relying on so-called cure recipes they've seen online. And most of this false information has been shared millions of times across the continent.
Morina King is a volunteer with the Kenyan Red Cross. She distributes sanitizers, soap and masks on the streets of Nairobi and offers accurate information as opposed to the misinformation online.
Other people are telling us that they're drinking a lot, so it means they cannot contact the virus. And there are people who believe that COVID-19 is not for Africans. They are saying that thing is... In fact, this morning someone carried me and he told me COVID-19 is just for rich people. He doesn't believe in that.
She says the only way to counter the online misinformation is doing what she's doing, talking to people, answering their questions, and trying to calm their fears. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, Madagascar is now exporting its purported herbal cure for COVID-19 to several other African nations. The World Health Organization is urging it to put the COVID organics drink through clinical testing to prove whether it actually works.
We are advising the government of Madagascar to take this product through a clinical trial and are prepared to collaborate with them. We've also invited them to join the WHO coordinated solidarity trial where other therapeutics are being tested out. So we would caution and advise against countries adopting a product which has not been taken through tests to see its efficacy against COVID-19.
Brazil reported a record increase in the number of virus cases and deaths on Wednesday. More than 10,000 infections and 615 deaths were confirmed. It's prompted the country's new health minister to flag the possibility of strict lockdowns in hard-hit areas. Overall, Brazil has registered more than 8,500 deaths and 125,000 cases. President Jair Bolsonaro has repeatedly downplayed the danger of the virus and fired the previous health minister last month after tensions over the country's response. Healthcare workers around the world have been applauded for their sacrifices during the pandemic, but some who risk their lives to help others get little recognition or support. Our Latin America editor, Lucia Newman, joined the sanitation workers on shift in Chile's capital, Santiago.
They make their living by doing the dirty work. Humberto, Sergio, Francisco, and Roberto are a team. From dawn till early morning, they pick up the rubbish from homes to hospitals in this working-class Santiago neighborhood. A bell alerts residents that they're coming. Humberto Magaña has been doing this for 33 years.
Someone has to do it. We don't have advanced education, so we have to do this. But I'm not sorry. On the contrary, it's a noble job.
Maybe so, but it's hazardous.
This is dangerous because of the dogs. People leave sharp objects in the bags, even syringes. We pick all this up with our hands and get infections.
There's no sugarcoating it. This is one of the least hygienic and most smelly jobs that one can have. And it's now become one of the most dangerous because these men have no idea if the rubbish that they're handling over and over again belongs to people who have been infected with COVID-19.
Francisco Perez is now afraid to go home.
Because of the family. They say this virus gets stuck to the bags and to the handles on the truck.
Chile's more than 16,000 sanitation employees work with gloves that easily rip to shreds. The few disposable face masks the company gave these workers ran out long ago, so they wear whatever they find.
The security measures in this country are appalling for this sector, especially under these new conditions.
But while the private companies aren't paying these men any extra, ordinary people are showing their appreciation.
Rubbish collectors have always been stigmatized and seen as the lowest on the totem pole, but now with this, people are giving us credit where it's due.
It's what keeps their spirits up, as they joke with obvious pride that they're now considered part of the front line against coronavirus. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Santiago.
At least 11 people have been killed and up to 1,000 left struggling to breathe after a gas leak at a plastics factory in India. The plant was due to reopen soon after being closed for 40 days under India's coronavirus lockdown. Elizabeth Puranam reports from the capital, New Delhi.
Panic and chaos in India's southern city of Visakhapatnam as people living in an industrial area began losing consciousness. That's after a gas leak at a plastics factory owned by South Korean company LG Chemicals. The leak happened early on Thursday morning when most people were asleep. The National Disaster Response Force evacuated at least 1,000 people from a 3-kilometre radius around the factory.
There were some people who were unconscious or semi-conscious. There were people who were not able to move. There were children, there were women, there were people who are elders. All of them were helped.
At least 800 were taken to hospital with breathing difficulties and irritated skin. Police said that styrene gas leaked out of 2 5,000-ton tanks, which had been left unattended as the factory was closed for 40 days during India's lockdown. They said that heat produced inside the tanks was released soon after the factory reopened. LG Chemicals confirmed the plant wasn't operating because of the lockdown, but said there were maintenance staff at the facility. Emergency workers said the leak was brought under control by midday.
So now the focus is not so much on the gas leakage as the effects of the gas leakage and the treatment of the people who have been affected.
LG said it was investigating the cause.
The Industries Minister of the state of Andhra Pradesh said it looked as though proper procedures weren't followed when the plant reopened. He also said they want the company to ensure the same level of responsibility is taken if the incident were to happen in the EU or United States.
Police in the eastern city of Raigad also revealed that there was a gas leak at a paper mill on Wednesday. They said the owner tried to hide the incident, in which at least 7 workers were hospitalized, some in critical condition. Like the factory in Visakhapatnam, police said the paper mill had also been shut during India's lockdown and workers had been preparing to reopen it. Elizabeth Puranam, Al Jazeera, New Delhi.
Flash floods caused by heavy rains have killed at least 65 people in Rwanda. 5 bridges were washed away and dozens of homes destroyed. Flooding across eastern Africa has led to more than 260 deaths in recent days. Uganda has also been badly affected, along with Kenya, where 100,000 people have been displaced. The embattled Prime Minister of Lesotho says he's retiring at the end of July. Thomas Tabane has been implicated in the murder of his estranged wife 3 years ago in a scandal that's rocked the small mountain kingdom. But the 80-year-old said he's leaving because of his age, not because of the growing political pressure on him. His new wife has also been charged, while his lawyers argued he's immune from prosecution.
I took the decision to retire from office voluntarily, despite the fact that my constitutional term is due to end in 2022. As I did indicate in January, the job of Prime Minister requires sensory perception as well as rapid and physical strength. Due to my age, I am no longer as energetic as I used to be. As such, I have decided to voluntarily vacate office and over the reins of government in accordance with the laws of Lesotho.
Dozens of Israelis have protested against a court ruling that allows Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to form a new government despite being under indictment for corruption. Some demonstrators chained themselves to metal barriers outside the Prime Minister's office. On Wednesday, Israel's Supreme Court ruled that Netanyahu can form a coalition with his rival Benny Gantz. And Israel's president has now given him the mandate to form the government, which is expected to be sworn in next week. Harry Fawcett is in West Jerusalem and has more on Gantz and Netanyahu's unlikely coalition.
These men don't trust each other. Indeed, Benny Gantz had made his entire political career, a short one that it is, about removing from office someone that he said was corrupt and had poisoned Israeli democracy. And so when you think of just how Benjamin Netanyahu has come back from where he was under indictment, which he still is, of course, the trial is due to start at the end of this month, losing or at least failing to win 3 inconclusive elections, a high court consideration of the legality of his being able to stand as a prime minister in waiting to form a new government. One by one, each of those impediments have fallen. But yes, what is remaining is now this very strange beast of a government in terms of Israeli political history, where both men will be sworn in as alternate prime minister at the same time. Netanyahu going first for 18 months, then Gantz. They've had to change fundamental laws in order to allow this to happen. And to ensure that Netanyahu retains his prime ministerial status throughout the 3-year term, potentially extending to a 4-year term of this government. So he'll be able to fight his 3 corruption cases from a position of strength and power, and to try to ensure that Gantz is handed over power in 18 months' time.
A second member of a popular left-wing band in Turkey has died after going on hunger strike for nearly a year in protest at the government banning the group. Ibrahim Gökçek, who was a guitarist in the folk music band Group Yorum, died in hospital 2 days ago. Singer Helen Bolek lost her life in early April on the 288th day of her strike. They were also fasting to pressure the government to free jailed members of the group. It accuses them of being linked to the Revolutionary People's Liberation Front, which is designated a terrorist organisation by Turkey, the US and the EU. With half of humanity under lockdown, there aren't many things the world can collectively enjoy, but Thursday offers one of those rare moments and people only have to look up to the sky. It's the final supermoon of the year, the celestial event where the moon is in its closest orbit to Earth. Appearing around 6% bigger and brighter than usual, it's also known as a flower moon, signifying springtime in the Northern Hemisphere. The next chance to see a supermoon won't be until April next year, so let's hope we have a clear sky. Plenty more for you anytime on our website. The address of that is aljazeera.com, and you can also watch us live by clicking on that orange live icon, aljazeera.com. A reminder of the top stories here on Al Jazeera. There's been more detail on how badly the coronavirus pandemic is damaging global economies. A further 3.2 million people have filed for unemployment in the US in the past week. That takes the total number of people who've lost their jobs since the outbreak began to more than 33 million.
What we know is this is a White House very eager to bring back the economy, pushing very hard as a solution to these job losses that are historic in nature, being compared to the Great Depression. But the reality is, well, these jobs were lost very quickly over a matter of weeks. The recovery is going to be phased. That means it's going to take some time. Now, the U.S. president continues to project optimism in the midst of all of this. But at the same time, the reality is that the projections are gloomy, and they're going to continue to be for some time.
New figures show black people in Britain are 4 times more likely to die from coronavirus than white people. The country's statistics agency says people of almost all ethnic minorities are more likely to be killed by the virus. It said relative poverty was likely to be a factor. Reports from several other Western nations have shown similar results. The mayor of Moscow has extended the city's lockdown until the end of the month. The Russian capital's 11 million people can only leave their homes for essential services and have to apply to use public transport. The mayor also said he believes the real number of cases in the Russian capital is around 300,000, 3 times higher than the official total. The United Nations is urging the world's richest nations to give billions of dollars to help protect people in the poorest countries from coronavirus. The head of the World Food Programme says the pandemic could lead to a significant rise in conflict, hunger and poverty. 11 people have died after a gas leak at an Indian factory. Up to 1,000 people were left with breathing problems after the incident at a plastics plant in the east of the country. The facility, owned by the South Korean firm LG, had been closed for 40 days due to India's coronavirus lockdown. Those are the top stories. Do stay with us on Al Jazeera. The stream is up next.
Welcome to the Stream Home Edition. How do you talk about something as intimate as death and grieving during a global pandemic? Well, often when we have difficult conversations, you, our online community, you, our viewers, help us do that. Have a look here on my Twitter feed, online at our Twitter feed, and just scooting down to us explaining what the show was about today: coronavirus, death and grieving. And then last night, Nicole jumped online and told us this: I lost my dad 2 weeks ago, went to the service, could not touch, kiss or hug anyone. I could not hug or visit my dad as he was home the last few weeks of his life. I comfort myself with the fact that I am not alone, as alone I am in this experience. Nicole, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for sharing something so intimate with us. If you're in our YouTube commentary and a chat section, YouTube can share your stories. Thank you very much if you're able to do that, or ask our guests questions. You're very welcome to do that. You know how to do that in the YouTube chat. I want you to meet our guests. Hesina, welcome to the stream. Tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on the show, first of all. My name is Hasina Zaman, and I run Compassionate Funerals based in East London, and we run a funeral service for the diverse community. Thank you.
It's so good to have you. Thank you so much for coming. Mahera, remind everybody who you are. Welcome back to the stream.
Thank you so much, Femi, for having me back on. I'm Mahera Desai. I'm a clinical psychologist in Mumbai, India, and I'm co-author of the book, The Coronavirus, What You Need to Know About the Global Pandemic.
Thanks for coming. And Caitlin, it's good to have you on the stream. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you so much for having me. My name's Caitlin Butler. I'm a chaplain at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, and I'm also a Presbyterian minister.
Caitlin, what are your days like now as a hospital chaplain? What kind of things are you doing that are different than before the coronavirus pandemic?
Mm-hmm. In some ways, insofar as I'm working with patients, families, and staff, my days have not changed. And in others, obviously there's an increased amount of distance that I have to keep from my patients in moments that are so intimate and that otherwise I would intentionally be very close with them. You know, when we have a death, when we have a loss, we always encourage patients and families to touch the body, to be with their loved one, to hold them, to sing to them, to pray for them. And we're having to get creative and think about new ways to mark loss and to create new rituals with people that are meaningful for that moment and meet people where they're at.
Hannah, this idea of touch and comfort when you're trying to grieve, when someone is dying, and that almost feels like it's part of us, that we need to do that. From a clinical psychologist point of view, what is happening when we feel that need to put our arm around somebody or hug them or hold someone's hand as they're passing away? What have we lost right now?
So the grieving process, Femi, involves 5 stages, as Elizabeth Ross has mentioned, and that involves denial. Then there's anger around the situation where one cannot come to terms with it. Then there is bargaining where people feel they could have done more in the situation to help, prevent the loss of their loved one. Then comes the stage of sadness and grief and loss and depression, finally with acceptance. So in this lockdown, what the lack of being able to touch or the lack of being able to sometimes even see your close one gone increases the duration of denial and of anger, making it so much more difficult to grieve and delays the process.
Hasina, I'm just looking at your website here, where you're doing compassionate funerals, and there's an update about the coronavirus, and you're trying to reassure people that they can still have a funeral. But how do they have a funeral when you can't be close to each other? And there's a limit to how many people can be in a space at the same time.
Yeah, so as Caitlin said, that we have had to get creative. As Mahera said, that we are very aware of the grieving process, and I would say that we don't necessarily see them in the grieving process in that stage, but we have had to get more training within the team. We reorganised our space so we can still allow the loved one to go and do their wash with adequate PPE, making sure we're safe, our families are safe, the bereaved are safe, and even the deceased, they don't pass on the virus to us. So we've had to take on certain procedures. I would say we've been a bit radical, because initially we was doing what everyone was doing. We were saying no, we can't do anything, and we just felt like really like quite tyrants, and it wasn't part of who we were. Compassionate funerals is all about being compassionate in times of death and dying, and having maximum contact and connection and engagement. And then we literally overnight we literally saw that crumble away. So I think 2 weeks we just did whatever we could. And then we said, right, let's find out what we have to do to move through this.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking here, Caitlin, I'm going to share this tweet with you. This is from Laughing is Life. The worst part of this whole COVID mess is all the people dying alone, people losing their loved ones and not even being able to say goodbye. I can't imagine the pain. You are probably the closest to many people as they pass. Can you tell us what that's like?
You know, I would echo that tweet. It's incredibly painful. I mean, I don't think I could have ever imagined anything like what we're seeing right now. And as far as people dying alone and not being able to say goodbye, I think it's really important to help people find ways to say goodbye and to help people figure out how to maintain a relationship with their dead. I encourage families to say out loud the things that they need their loved ones to know, and to hold hope and hold faith that in some way or another that message is conveyed to them. You know, I think about the losses I've experienced in my own life, and maintaining a relationship with my own dead relatives is something that is so intrinsically important, and that has really shaped my life and shapes my days still. And so we find different ways to do that. I've held phones outside of rooms so people can say the rosary aloud, or sometimes I will write a family members. There's a Muslim family recently who I brought a Quran to and wrote on a Post-it note everything that their loved ones wanted to be said to them, and I asked the nurses to read that Post-it over and over and over again when they went into the room to cluster their care, so that the family could know that whether they could be there or not, that their loved one heard their words, and that the messages that they needed them to know were said aloud.
Mahela, I see you nodding. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I feel that palliative care is very critical in these moments, because as difficult as it is for the families to deal with the loss of the one who's gone, and that's a more long-term plan that we need to prepare for. Well, for those who are realizing that their health is deteriorating, time is short, and technology can come to great advantage over here. Even, probably looking beyond just curing the symptoms, even looking at mental health concerns, the anxiety can help soften and ease the situation for those who are passing away and succumbing to COVID-19.
I want to tell you, audience and guests, about this gentleman here. His name is Joe Carpentieri. Joe got a cough back in March. He had a really bad cough for about a week and a half. Other than that, he was really fit, very fit, 72-year-old. He was rushed into hospital one morning, and hours later, he died. And so his family didn't have much notice about what to do and how to prepare for his funeral, and his daughter Cindy was kind enough to share with us on the stream what it was like trying to bury somebody during a global pandemic. Here she is.
We were permitted to have 10 people at the viewing, but we needed to enter the funeral home in small groups of 2 to 3 people. So many of our family and friends were not able to join us to pay their final respects. After the funeral home, we processed to the cemetery, where we were able to watch the casket be laid to rest at the gravesite. But we were not permitted to get out of our cars. We were not allowed to have flowers. We could not have a priest come to give a blessing, let alone have an actual funeral. It was very difficult, and it remains very difficult. My mother and brothers are also sick with the virus. So at this point, I've still yet to hug my mother at all since my father has passed. I have been with my immediate family, which my husband and my son, which I'm very grateful to have them here with me, but I've not been able to see any other family members, really. So the grieving process has been very different than what you would consider to be typical.
Zina, we're also getting so many comments in our YouTube chat about experiences that people are having with death and dying and funerals. Victor, for instance, says that in Ghana, the number of funeral attendees are limited to 25 people. Other places, it could be only 5 or 10. So how do you create a funeral for people that is compassionate, but they can't bring everybody they want to bring? What do you do?
So what we've been doing is just working with the guidelines and being creative. So we've been saying to families, you can actually. So we've actually bought some tripods. So we set phones up. One phone is just actually filming the whole video, and another phone separately is live streaming the videos, and then people can be involved. So we've been using technology. But then also there's some cemeteries that just allows only 5 members, and then they don't even allow any filming. So it's really, some places are really, really tough, and then some